Ghost of Khorne here, and today I'll be sharing with you how I build my armies in Total War Warhammer. So in Warhammer 3 you generally don't have to build perfect armies, as most units are quite good in this game, unlike in Warhammer 2. But that does not mean that there aren't optimal army compositions. You're probably already aware, but putting units in your armies just because it looks cool is not the most optimal approach. While this might be acceptable on lower difficulties, if you're aiming to learn to play the game and play on harder difficulties, you should try and abandon that mindset. Armies comprised of 2 of each unit won't perform as effectively as armies with defined unit roles. In campaigns, it's better to construct the armies based on your faction's strength and the weaknesses of the faction you're opposing. So for instance, when facing the Empire, bring numerous single entity monsters, and when battling the dwarves, bring units with lots of anti-infantry capabilities. The goal when building armies is to keep them as straightforward as possible, while maximizing their effectiveness. An excellent example of this is creating low-tier armies that outperform expectations, such as using zombies or goblins for vampire counts and greenskins. These highly affordable units align with their respective factions' mechanics better than other choices. For instance, goblins trigger the war much faster than orcs, and zombies are much more durable than most other vampire count units. This doesn't mean you should never recruit other units, but these units should comprise the majority of your armies. If you're playing factions that benefit from combined arms, like the Empire and the Dwarves, you'll notice that your melee infantry isn't as potent as that of factions like the Warriors of Chaos. However, you'll also observe that you possess superior range units. It might seem reasonable to aim for a balanced 50-50 split between melee and range units. Still, this approach can needlessly weaken your armies and make it more complex to control than necessary. You should play to your strengths, and for these factions, ranged firepower is a considerable advantage. Your armies only require a few melee infantry units and a couple of heroes to hold the line, while you fill the remaining slots with ranged units. This tactic is effective for most races in the game. You just need to ensure you have the means to protect your backline from the enemy. When considering artillery pieces, you must be cautious about the type of army you're creating. Artillery is best suited for armies that favor a defensive wait-and-see strategy rather than a rush. A suitable number of artillery units to recruit is around 4 units. Fewer might feel underwhelming, while more can make defending them more challenging. If you're enjoying the video thus far, please consider subscribing, as your support really does mean a lot to me. Now back to the video. Cavalry presents a bit of a challenge, since it can be somewhat lackluster in Warhammer 3. It demands a fair amount of micromanagement to use effectively while providing minimal value on the battlefield. If your armies are primarily comprised of range units, I'd recommend avoiding cavalry entirely, as its micro-intensive nature may result in higher casualties. Cavalry units are better suited for armies with a strong melee focus, especially when you need means to reach the enemy backline. The same reasoning applies to chariots and chariot-like units, such as locomotives that the Chaos Dwarves possess. Flying units follow a similar logic. Do not recruit them if you're not playing a rush-focused faction, and avoid recruiting them in large numbers. Most non-single entity flying units in the game are relatively weak and can be detrimental. They have high balance of power values, but they often fail to justify their cost, since they are very vulnerable to both melee engagements and ranged fire. They're mostly used to occupy the enemy range units. Concerning single entity monsters, it's an all or nothing situation. While single entities might seem like the game's strongest unit, you need to consider the context. If you have just one powerful monstrous unit in your army, the AI will prioritize targeting it and focus its fire. Consequently, you'll rarely get value from your monster units, and they also require significant support in the battlefield to perform effectively. Armies consisting of exclusively single entity monsters are undoubtedly powerful, allowing you to overwhelm nearly any opposition. However, unlike in Warhammer 2, there's often little reason to build such armies, as they tend to be overkill and are quite costly to maintain. Finally, heroes are always a valuable addition to your army, especially in range-focused armies. In Warhammer 3, the AI often clusters its units together, particularly around small single entities, making them easy targets for ranged attacks or spells. In summary, when building armies, aim to align with your faction's strengths rather than weaknesses. For example, don't construct Empire armies consisting solely of greatswords, as they perform less effectively against factions with superior infantry. Strive to minimize the micromanagement required during battle, as overextending yourself can result in unnecessary damage to your units. Avoid recruiting units that don't complement your army compositions, such as hell cannons in an army primarily comprised of chosen, or Kadai destroyers and Chaos Dwarf forces focused on range combat. But this is my understanding of how to build armies in this game. Do you like recruiting optimal armies, or do you prefer recruiting one of each unit? Please do tell me in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and until next time.